As Carl Jung described it, the full journey towards wholeness must always include the negative experiences, or what we might describe as our cross experience, that we usually want to reject or hide or deny that even exist. At the core of his writings is really a challenge to search beneath the surface of our faith and see what is sacred in everyone and everything. What the author believes is the core practice that Christianity calls us to. That can even be, I think, more difficult if we have, through our history and our prior teachings, embraced the story of original sin. If your lens is filtered with a belief that because of the fall, all human beings are born into a sinful nature, unworthy, some have even described it as depraved, and only through the sacrificial death of Jesus do we have a chance of being acceptable in God's eyes. It can seem nearly impossible to see God in ourselves, let alone God in other people. This has been the accepted narrative in mainstream Christianity since St. Augustine introduced it in the 5th century. Yet those very early Christians and subsequently many monks and mystics and even other faith traditions have embraced God through the lens of original blessing, a positive and generous cosmic view of life. Original blessing believes that we have been created in the image and likeness of God, of good, of love. It is, in fact, our spiritual DNA. And our human journey really becomes about uncovering our goodness, our godness, not only in us, but in everyone and everything. And our partner on this journey is what the author calls the universal Christ, in this dance that we embark upon towards sacred wholeness. Sacred wholeness is really just a reflection of our ability to embrace all of life's experiences and discover God, discover good right in the midst of them. And Christ becomes that voice, that inner call to each of us to become whole and true to ourselves. It seems that God's two main tools in this direction seem to be great love and great suffering. And often it is great love that invariably leads us to great suffering, just as the life of Jesus demonstrated to us. The author writes that God seems to send us on the path towards our own wholeness, not by eliminating obstacles, but by making use of them. And we can begin to embrace this divine dance when we understand that neither our great suffering nor our great love is deserved or earned. I want you to hear that again, that we can begin this process when we can really embrace that neither the sufferings or the love that we receive is something that we've had to earn or that by some action that we've taken, we deserve. This is both given freely. And the belief that we have to earn God's love through acts of obedience or devotion, or that we suffer because God punishes us when we're not being obedient, in what keeps us in this state of separation and unworthiness. Sacred wholeness is not about eliminating our suffering. Boy, at times I wish it was. You know, I had this belief when I first found unity that this was going to be the way that I could finally eliminate the suffering that I had experienced in life. But I've come to discover that that's not what this journey is all about. It's not about eliminating physical or mental or spiritual suffering, But sacred wholeness is really more about our ability to embrace it all as a path for transformation, an opportunity to reveal more of God in us, as us, and through us. This is what the author calls grace in action. He defines grace as the natural, loving flow of things when we allow it instead of resisting it. And sin is any cutting or limiting of that circuit. And we all are in that state of sin every now and then. In the Gospels, who Jesus graced with healing doesn't seem to be based on this idea of obedience to the law or devotion to God. In none of the accounts, the healing depended on someone's worthiness. In fact, he often seemed to select people who society would deem unworthy. He made it a point to heal those who were described as the least deserving. And instead of taking credit for the healing, he makes a point of telling them, it is your faith that has made you well. And he often followed it by, now go in peace, or go and sin no more. He really sought to empower them in their own faith, in their own ability to receive the power that was already present in their own allowing of that natural, loving flow of God to move into their lives and not be codependent on any one person to make that healing happen. And the universal Christ extends that same invitation to each of us. As Carl Jung described it, the full journey towards wholeness must always include the negative experiences, or what we might describe as our cross experience, that we usually want to reject or hide or deny that even exist. And we are in that place of sin, that place where we cut off and limit God's love when we do try and push away or project onto others our shadow selves into popular culture, not necessarily in a religious sense, but just in a awakening to we cannot truly heal ourselves until we're willing to embrace all of ourselves, not just those parts of us that we like. And the quantum living process that some of you in this community have been going through and others have been embracing around the country and the world includes that practice of bringing in those parts of us that we often hide in the darkness of our being out into the light of our awareness to be acknowledged and to be integrated into our whole being. This path of humbly and compassionately embracing all parts of ourselves calls us to follow and to trust our own inner voice, our own inner wisdom, our own inner Christ nature. And it's not easy to do in a world that instructs us to put our trust in the objective and solid forms, into the appearances of what is. Many of us have been trained to write off that inner voice as mere emotion or some kind of ego psychological manipulation happening within us. And yet, following that inner wisdom has been the path of great mystics, of saints, of masters of both art and science. People like Da Vinci and Einstein knew that by listening to that inner voice, those inner wisdom ideas, that transformation, that something new could be created out of that. And it's certainly been something that many ordinary folks have also embraced as part of their life. When we can allow this intuitive guidance to lead the way, it feels like a calm and humble ability to quietly trust ourselves and to quietly trust God at the same time. There's a peace. And I get how Jesus said, go in peace, because there's a peace that comes from knowing that we don't have to do this alone, that there are ways and ideas that flow in and through us that support us in whatever challenges might arise. But it takes practice to get to know this inner voice, to know when it is your own divine wisdom speaking to you from those other ego thoughts that might arise. And I can tell you one good way to do a check-in, is if those thoughts or feelings or that guidance feels harsh, shaming, or diminishing to either yourself or any other person, then you can be assured it's not the guidance of God. Although it's interesting, the author points out to us that that's oftentimes the voice that people would be assured was God. And when those positive thoughts come, we think, oh, that's just our ego talking. If an idea comes that wants to be expressed as absolute truth or needs to control or impress one another, it's probably not the voice of God. When we listen to those voices that support us, when we listen to those voices that encourage us, that are urging us to move into new ways of experiencing life, when we listen to what's alive in us, then we are listening to that voice of the inner Christ. And when we can trust and listen to this inner, divine, true self, we move forward with our best, our kindest, and our most inclusive self. And so as we take this opportunity today, let's practice to see if we can't begin to hear with greater clarity our own inner voice. So I invite you now just to set aside anything that you might be holding on to. And if you're comfortable, close your eyes. And just begin to be aware of the breath as it's flowing in and out of your body. Allowing that breath to calm and to relax your physical body. Allowing that breath to release and let go of any thoughts that you've been having about the past or the present or the future. And simply be open to listening with that inner ear. In fact, you might even want to imagine that you are turning on the ear that hears the voice of your heart. And if there's a particular question or guidance that you're seeking in this moment, if there is something that you long to know and to understand in a deeper, God-minded way, simply ask the question, asking it to the highest part of yourself, your true self, and then be willing to simply sit and see what arises. Let's take just a few moments in the quietness of our own being to hear the whisper of the inner Christ. And know that whether or not you've gotten clarity in this moment, as you continue to ask, clarity will come. Ideas will form. Healing will unfold. It is in the realm of the heart where our own inner Christ lives that all things, all understanding, all life lives from. And so as you're ready, you can begin to Bring your attention back to this time and place, becoming aware of the feet on the floor and the hands in your lap and the breath moving in and out of your body. And whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. You know, we've all been created with the very DNA of God, blessed with this divine love from the very beginning. The universal Christ is that bridge, that conduit that allows the grace of God to flow through and express as each of us. The journey to our sacred wholeness is simply one of allowing that grace to embrace all parts of us, the beauty and the light and the depths of our suffering. And our invitation this week is to focus on doing simply that, allowing that divine flow of love to uncover our sacred wholeness, to notice the times when we might have our foot on that hose, on that conduit, blocking the natural flow of God's love and God's grace into our lives, and using whatever practices that we have in our toolbox to support us in lifting our foot as far above this flow of good as we can by connecting and listening to and trusting our inner Christ, to allow God to live through our heart. May you be blessed as you experience that in the days and the weeks to come.
On earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. With God as a brother, and we all are we. Let me walk with my family in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my joyous vow. To take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. And as we go through the rest of this day and into our week, let us remember our prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. I am the light of God. The love of God enfolds us. I am the love of God. The power of God protects us. I am the power of God. The presence of God watches over us. I am the presence of God. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. All right, we'll see you next week, everyone.